We are here. After a bit of a hiccup, it's okay. We're good.
Technology is wonderful when it works.
Yes, I know. Yes. Okay. Let me go to. Okay. We're talking about, ironically, brain cramps, right? Like,
Yeah.
and what happens when you have those brain cramps and you need to use intuition to help you.
That's right.
Which is a great topic for today. So I wrote down a bunch of things. I think the first thing we should just do is just reintroduce ourselves so that anyone who's viewing for the first time can know who we are. So why don't you start?
Sure. My name is Jay. I have been a promotional marketing strategist for 30 years, but I also dove into personal development in a huge way, studying with Bob Proctor and some of the greats. He kind of gave me the keys to the kingdom, but man, I've been all over the map with so many different spiritual teachers and universal principle teachers, and so all of that kind of came together in a book called Sensory Media, Discover the Way to Anchor Your Brand and Be Memorable, which was the first book I wrote 6 years ago, which really turned the promotional products industry a little bit on its ear, teaching people how to use that media properly. And since then, I've created, aha moments, which I write to people on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, and the Aha Moment Journal. So having fun writing, having fun sharing, and now we're on this mission called the Human Approach, helping people rediscover their purpose and creating impact.
Mm-hmm. I love your copy. I love your emails. I think they're just so well written. So bravo to you for doing
that. I have so much fun writing them. I really do.
So my name is Allison Sutter, and I am a teacher. I've been a teacher forever. Started in elementary school and then moved on to self-help spirituality. And the focus of my work is on intuition, transforming fear, and being one's authentic self. And the trifecta of those three things coming together, I have learned over time, ironically, is that they're so powerful when combined together in a person's life, which is why I love doing these conversations, because I think intuition is underutilized.
Totally. Well, we're sensory beings, and that, hence sensory media. We're sensory beings. We learn through our senses, but, we have not been taught about that sixth sense, about how the fact that we are spiritual beings and how we are connected to oneness, to a central consciousness. So, if we're only living in our five senses that we know about, we're certainly experiencing life on the planet, but we're not experiencing all that our soul is meant to experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting. I think it could be, this is an assumption on my part, but one of the things that I think people don't consider intuition, or don't consider it and involve it in their whole process of making decisions, is because they don't see a direct translation to money, which is ironic, because I don't know if you've read this book. I got this book in the mail. It was Kajabi, where I host all my courses. It's called Believe It, by Jamie Lima. I hope you pronounce it. She's the founder of It Cosmetics. So her first chapter, first sentence is, when your intuition talks to you, believe it. That thing we call intuition, it's your soul. You can trust it. She's like a billionaire or something. It's ridiculous. So it's like, if somebody, doesn't understand, just go read a book like that. And if your thing is, I have to make lots of money, then, maybe that'll be your permission slip to understand how to integrate intuition into your life. But it's way more than that. I mean, way more than that. I mean, when you say?
Oh, totally. And if you didn't read the book, that first line is worth the price of admission, that's the hard part. Is, I think, you've been an educator your whole life. I've been in the education system, and I mean, I branched out to start to teach probably 25 years ago. And so and what I teach is similar on the same lines as you, which is why we resonate so much, is trying to help people understand who they are, and what access they have, and how they have this guidance system inside them, and that is not taught in the education system. I mean, we are taught to conform. We're taught to memorize facts. We are taught in not just the education system, but religion all over, is that we're powerless. We are physical beings on this planet. We are powerless. There's a power much bigger than we are, and that we are here just to kind of act out through our senses. And that it couldn't be further from the truth. So when people understand intuition, and I think some people will spend their whole lives and still not really grasp it, I think it's probably one of the most important topics that we can share with people, is what that feels like, which is our topic today. Get out of your head and into your heart, right? What that feels like to actually be guided by, that inner knowing.
Yeah. So we use the term, or you use the term, you suggested the copywriting, but the brain, or the heart has the answers. So just to be clear, when we're talking about there, we're also talking about the inner realm, and intuition is part of that. You could say heart energy, but I believe if that's your focus, it's just intuition coming through you in what you consider to be heart energy.
Yeah. So we themed this like your inner crystal ball, and I picked up a crystal ball at I think it was at the exhibition, the Toronto exhibition a couple of years ago, and they had a whole bunch of crystals, and it was like, oh, I couldn't resist this crystal ball, and I remember coming home and taking a picture of it and putting on Facebook, and I said, now I have this crystal ball, and it was sort of like, and again, my intuition kicked in and said, duh, you've had it all along.
Yeah.
That all you need to do, and I think that's where the heart comes in from the physical, from the electromagnetic field concept. If you need sort of the tangible, that where it comes in terms of, and we'll get into it with the, the whole overthinking process and what happens when you actually feel those answers and you start to listen and start to trust. It's a very different way of problem solving, and it needs its own commitment and methodology, and it's a very different than solving a problem through your head, right?
Yeah.
So right, exactly. I said in my email, I said in my email that I sent out to everybody, I said, I think it's Albert Einstein's fault, because he's somebody that I've studied, for years. And he always says, I don't think I'm smarter than anyone else. I just stay with the problem longer. And so, I've been really good at that, of kind of saying, I don't take anything for face value. I ask a lot of questions, and I'm happy to allow, massage and kind of think through and, whatever. And sometimes those problems can fester to the point where, like, I'm forcing an answer, but yet when I get over myself and kind of, again, get out of my head and say, quit trying to figure it out, throw the questions out there, and then listen for the answers, listen for the answers to come in, which is why sometimes I think when he says, staying with the problem longer, it's not that it means that you're going to, try and sit there with pencil and paper and everything that and say, I got to figure this out, with what I know. The answer may very well be what you don't know, right? If you knew the answer, then you would probably go and do whatever that is. So allowing yourself to sit with the, what you do know, put those questions out there, and then, you're the intuitive expert. I mean, how to, how that process works,
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, as I'm just thinking about this question as we sit here, the habit of humans, at least where we are in the last, I don't know, 300 years, 200 years, 300 years, is we're used to using the logic. So this resonates with people because pretty much everyone does this. We tend to overthink. We don't consider other options. Our only option is think harder, think more logically. Like, there's this pattern of behavior in humans that says,
logic and evidence.
Yeah, use the logic more and you'll figure it out, when there's this other source of information sitting there available to you 24/7. And you can incorporate both of them. Clearly, we're logical beings. So we can incorporate both methodologies, both approaches. But instead of getting to the point where, steam's coming out of your ears and you got your head on your desk and you've lost all hope, try this other thing. Try this thing that you already have available to you that's guiding you in the perfect way for you. It's like pure perfection in how ideas come through to a person. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the ways in which you've learned to trust your intuition? How does it come through? Because everyone's different. So how does it come through for you? And what has it done for you to trust it?
And trust is, I mean, that's a big word, because I interjected when you were talking about intuition and said evidence, because the whole thinking process, the analytical process, and yes, there's a lot to be said for it, for sure. But we always look for evidence. We look for concrete. We look for studies. We look for history. We look for mathematical equations. We look at something concrete to say that's the answer. When, as you said, the answer, for you, whatever that happens to be, may not be in the paperwork. It may not be current evidence, right? So I think over the years, I think I mentioned in the last time that we talked, and worth repeating, that I knew years ago that I was intuitive. I think a lot of people, who are empaths, or anybody who has, they say that people who, and I'm not putting myself in this category necessarily, but I think to every degree, everybody has psychological issues going on, but the people who are often diagnosed as having mental illness are actually very, very intuitive. They think at a much higher level, and they operate on a different frequency, which is why oftentimes that they communicate with music and creativity and everything. They're operating on a very different frequency than the average person is, and they're mislabeled, right? So I think that, years ago, knowing that I was more of a sensitive person, and I used to say to my dad, I hate that I'm so sensitive. He goes, no, that's a good thing. And over the years, I found that, being intuitive, sometimes you spook people out, or you just kind of, I drive intuitively, I take turns where I know I'm supposed to, or I leave at certain time. I do so much intuitively. I've got to the point now, and this is hilarious when you realize how in tune you are. My son he just cracks himself up every time he sees it. But I am 100% in tune with when my oven heats up to the right temperature. So, and it's like 100%, no fail. So, every time I'm working and I'm getting ready and everything, and all of a sudden I go bing, and I turn around and I put the plate in the oven, I shut the door, and it goes beep, beep, and it tells me that it's ready. And it's like bang on within it. And if it doesn't go right away, I kind of give it a look, and then it goes beep, beep, it's so bang on, right? So it was something that I squashed years ago, thinking, again, that it's not a welcome trait. It's not something. But then what happened, I was in high school. I think I was in 10th grade, and it was near the end of the year, where the teachers just kind of do fluffy stuff for fun. And the teacher at the front of the room, he says, okay, I'm going to go around the class, and I'm going to ask everybody, I'm going to write down a number, and I want you to tell me what that number is. So he went desk after desk, desk after desk, and I was sitting in the middle of the classroom, and I sat there, and I said to him, I said, I know it's a 1 and a 4, but I don't know if it's a 14 or a 40. And so I said, I'll say 41. So then he went da, 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 da. And at the end of it, he said, okay, I want you to know that first I wrote down the 4, and then I didn't know which side I was going to put the 1 on, but I made a 41. So, again, there was like little inklings that, without trying, I could easily just, when they say the first answer is the right answer, could easily kind of tap into that. But again, ignored it, because who goes to intuition school? We're not taught to, we're taught to build all our other senses and faculties, but not intuition, right? So it was like over the years of kind of testing that and allowing myself the, I'll say, gifting time. And I'm, and I am the worst for trying to work things out, because I'm impatient sometimes. It's like, just give me the frickin' answer. I want to keep going. I want to keep building. I want to keep, and being able to gift myself that time of going, if the answer's not coming, then you've got some blocks going there. You need to step away from yourself, and maybe you need to ask some different questions in order to get a different answer. Maybe the answers aren't coming because your questions are not right? So it's taking lots of tuning, but there are so many little things. And I always go back to that issue, in school about the 1 and the 4, of saying that came without even trying. So what else can I do without even trying, right? Yeah. And so now it's, in conversations, being in sync with the conversation, so that you can not trying to fill in people's sentences, but trying to be intuitive to understand where they are in the conversation. Are you gelling? Are you not gelling? And then when like we are here, like my conversation with you today, and I know you're the same, we're experts in our field, but this isn't a planned conversation. Everything that I'm talking about is pure channeling, right? It's pure just being totally open and allowing that energy to come through and say, I know whatever I'm going to say to you today is going to be, you know, present in the conversation, and it's going to be completely intuitive to what I think that we can deliver for our audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love that about I say that, I've said that before about, like, you know, these are not scripted conversations. And so when you look to evidence of intuitive guidance, look to the words that are coming out of your mouth. And most people don't make the connection between vocabulary and sentences and this concept of intuition. You're being guided to say certain things. If it's, of course, there's always the opportunity to be angry with someone and deliver those words, or intentionally loving words. But for the most part, like on a broader scale, you know, we're trusting that the right kinds of information will come through. While you were talking, I was thinking about too, it's interesting in terms of intuition. Sometimes you can look, if you are mindful about this stuff, you can look back and see where you were intuitively guided in a thought or a vision. Because actually, when I was in middle school, some kid came and did a social studies project report about Greece. He'd just been to Greece. And in hindsight, I remember seeing that picture and it causing me to have a visceral reaction. I mean, I'm in middle school. What do I know? You know? Well, that's where I met my husband. I met my husband in Greece many, 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 many years later. So intuitive information is always coming through. And then when my mom was dying of cancer, for some reason, but mind you, I was 20, I had no interest in writing books. I said to her, you know what, someday I'll write a book. Totally forgot about it. And then after I'd written the book, I said, oh, wait a second. That was intuition. Prophecy, you know, intuition can be prophetic in your own life. It can tell you where you're headed, which gives us evidence that it lives beyond time and space. It doesn't live here with us in this time-space curriculum that Earth School that we're taking, but it is beyond time and space, which is why it can deliver information to you in the perfect timing, in the perfect way for you as an individual, you know.
Well, it's true. I'll tell you, and you know what about that? That's funny. Here's a postcard. And it's actually seeded paper. So this was a gift in an event that we went to. And what they did, that they gave the postcard, they gave us two. And they said, do send one to yourself and one to somebody else. Write a nice little note on them, right? So now this is going back. I just want to see if the date is on here. The date isn't on here, but this is probably 2.5 years ago when I wrote this, well, at least 2 years ago that I wrote this postcard. And it says on here, sensory media, the next generation awaits. That was the note that I wrote to myself. So it was when everything shut down and my core business came to a screeching halt because we were heavily event-based, and all of a sudden there's no events going on. And it was kind of like, oh God, okay, well, I guess this is the time to, I'll take my sensory media book and I'll build a course and we'll do something else. And then in a bunch of notes, when I was purging a bunch of stuff in my office, I found this postcard and I had written to myself, sensory media, the next generation awaits. Yeah. So, and I think, it's what, you asked the question, like when, about evidence, about seeing and I think it's about, Steve Jobs always says you can only connect the dots backwards. And I think when you look back, like you just did about Greece and, and about writing the book and that, when you look back, you go, wow, I knew that, I knew that. And from a prophetic standpoint, but even from when you make a choice sometimes of, I said in my email to my people, I said I was gonna disclose my dilemma with you, and my dilemma was in buying a pre-construction condo prior to everything shutting down, and of course it looked like the most perfect strategy on paper. Because it was kind of like okay, I'm not even going to trust myself from a number standpoint. I didn't get my accountant to look at this, and I gave her the whole deal. Here's a business. Here's my personal. Here's everything. Here's how I'm going to fund it. Here's what it's going to look like. I've done all the research and everything, right? And then I pulled the trigger on the property, and then of course, you know, everything came down. And then it was like, shoot, now I was going to cash in my portfolio, you know, to fund it. And then the portfolio tanked, and I had to negotiate my way through with the people saying, you know, can you hold on, give my portfolio a little couple months to kind of come back. And I went through, and I was putting off the payments, and I'm like dancing, right? And then, you know, in the last while, I'm going through all that process going, well, what, you know, they are talking about market crashes and everything, you know, I go all of this analytical stuff, right? And then all of a sudden I said to somebody, you know what, I just want to unload this. I don't want the pressure, but I didn't want to react to sensory, right? I wanted to build in my mind my lifestyle. And I said to somebody the other day, because I said, I don't even know if I want to live there, and I'm really talking myself out of it, right? And all of a sudden I said to somebody a couple of days ago, I said, if that car was ready now, I'd move in right away. Like, and all of a sudden it was like, bing, like, oh, that is the right answer, you know? So, okay. So in the meantime, like, we've got some financial things we need to sort out, but because I don't know that answer right now, doesn't mean the answer isn't available. It just means I don't see it, right? I don't see it. So I need to ask a few different questions, get out of my head, and start allowing whatever that resolution is to kind of keep going in the meantime. And this has been a year of it. You know, it's been a year of just allowing myself to be guided more than trying to think through things, because so much is changing in the world right now that we're not in charge of a lot of what's going on, right? So we just kind of have to stay present and go, you know, as I told you, sometimes I go down the water and I go, what do you want me to do? Because it's like, sometimes it's just not clear, or these are too hard. You know, it's kind of like, no, we talked about authenticity last week, and I was thinking about afterwards, and I thought, no, sometimes I'm not in authenticity. I'm not doing the work that I'm meant to, you know, I'm doing other work just to fill in the blanks, right?
Yeah. So what you mentioned, is it okay if I read the questions that I had sent you? Because I think what it does, because okay. Because to me, what those questions do is you were talking about like being in your head. Well, I think when we're in our head, we're buying into mostly beliefs, and usually it's the limiting beliefs that are getting in the way. And then the heart space offers this other perspective. You can wrestle between the two, but in order to be more open to hearing in whatever way, and again, intuition can come through the imagination. It can come through just in ideas. It can come through in all the clairs, clairsentience, clairaudience, claircognizance, what they consider to be, you know, those types of experiences in the body. But if you find that you are having a brain cramp and you're overthinking, how do you go from there to this other place? Well, one thing you can do is ask yourself a series of questions to try to, you know, reorient yourself in a different direction. And so those questions go like this. The first question, I have found this question so valuable to ask myself to get myself out of the headspace. Am I willing to follow my highest level of excitement in any given moment today, taking it as far as I can take it, without making assumptions about what it's supposed to be, and stay in a positive mindset no matter what happens? So wherever you are in your emotional constitution during that day, what is the highest level of excitement you can get to in that moment? How far can you take it? You know, how far can you go with that activity that you're doing until you can't do it anymore, without thinking that it has to produce something specific, or the outcome has to be something specific. And no matter what happens, stay in a positive energy state. Very challenging, that last part. But if you can do that.
It is. And it was funny. I told you that I did exactly that before that question came in. And then after I read your question, I go, I did that just before you sent it, you know? And that's exactly what I did. Was I found something that was like, oh, this is so cool. And it happened to be a promotional product that I had stashed. I picked it up at a trade show a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is so timely. This is so perfect. And all of a sudden I took the picture and I got the website and I got some information, and I started just going after different customers. customers, and I was coming up with all these ideas as to how they could use it, where it would be relevant, and how, how it would, transform their relationships with their customers, and how they would keep their, there's so many different wins in there. And it was like, and I said to my colleague, I said, I parked my to-do list. Like, I totally parked it. And I just went off in this tangent for a couple of hours, and I was having so much fun just being in creative mode. And again, I had no idea who was going to pick up on it, if they would, whatever. And it didn't matter. It was just a matter of putting some really good stuff out there that, was probably new to them, right? So
that's a fantastic example. That's exactly the way that's working. Yeah, I mean, but a lot of people go, well, that's not productive. Like, it's not going to produce that. That is the question that, or the thought process, I think, that interrupts that, is they go, well, what's it going to produce for me? Well, that's the whole point. Don't assume what the outcome actually is. You have to give up that assumption of what you think with your logical mind it's supposed to produce for you. Hard to do.
And I think, you and I have talked about universal law, and one of them that sits with me is the law of detachment. For that reason, is that, I used to say to my son years ago, energy's never wasted. Like, and because he was golfing, and he was, he had scholarship opportunities, and then he goes, I don't even know if I'm going to be on the PGA tour. Like, I don't know if it's worth all the money, because it would have cost me like $30,000 US, a year to get him to go to this school to golf, right? And I said, William, I said, you're always learning. Like, it's all part and parcel of who you are and how you're building, and you're going to learn as many life lessons on the golf course as you are, anywhere. So, it's all part and parcel. You don't know what the outcome is, or who you might not meet, or what you might, discover by being in any of those circumstances. So, don't get attached to what that, and everybody gets really hyped about goals. And I think that you have to have, clarity in terms of who you are and what's important to you. And actually yesterday I went through a session about equating your highest values with how you're spending your time. And it was an excellent session. So, and again, it was about sort of that being in integrity with, what you're doing and who you are. But I think that's the thing, is that, go and sometimes just, again, when you said, Allison, when you're, when you hit that roadblock, just stop and find something that totally jazzes you. And it could be painting, it could be golfing, it could be talking on the phone with people, and just throw yourself into it for a little while, get energized by it, get, on that higher vibe. And oftentimes when you come back into your situation, you're going to come back with a different attitude, right? Yeah.
This question and this way of operating can buck up against the concept of goals, because the concept of goals has been so ingrained it's in our school systems. People talk about it as if that's the only way that you could ever have something happen. Actually, no, there's infinite numbers of ways. And if you find that you've set a goal, but it's just not happening. It's not like, for some people, they can set a goal and they're already in alignment, and things happen fluidly. It's like, because there's no resistance for them. But for other people, there's resistance. And so how do you get away from that? And how do you get back to doing what you want to do? You got to shift things around. You got to do something that's fun, that gets you in the energy and the flow, and allows you to get back to that thing that you want, maybe from a different route.
Right. Right. And I think the different route is really important, because so many times, I learned this years and years ago, that so many times when people are trying to make a decision, their decision is black or white. It's A or B. Do I take the job? Do I don't take the job? Do I move? Do I not move? Do I sell? Do I not sell? Do I buy? Do I not buy? And those are the polar opposites. But in between those polar opposites, you just said it, Allison, there's infinite number of possibilities, right? So, I was talking about, should I sell my house because it's a big house, and probably a family would love it right now, where I'm by myself in this big house. I don't really need it, right? And then I said to my colleague, I said, but I don't know that I want the disruption of moving. And she goes, well, what about selling it to somebody and then renting it off them? And that's the point. It wasn't, do I sell or not sell? It's like, what are all the other options in between that might feed, where I'm going and what I'm doing, and help somebody else out in the meantime, right?
Exactly. What's so interesting is, as you were talking, I was also thinking about, because as a viewer's always like, well, how do I trust my intuition? Or how do I get into that state of flow? What's interesting is, I was on a Clubhouse call yesterday, and they were doing exercises in intuition. And one person would think of, one of three colors or one of three numbers. And then everyone else had to try to intuit what they were thinking of. What was interesting as the people that were picking the colors, I got it right every time, by the way. But what they did
Oh,
is
wow.
one person had one color, and it was very clear. The other people picked two. One person picked like animals, and person picked colors. But with the color they picked like something that had these three colors in it. And so everyone who guessed was right because they were looking at something that had three colors in it. And then the woman who picked animals picked one animal, but in the background were the two other animals. So it's like, but originally when she said
Oh,
the answer, people were like, oh, I didn't get it right. But then as she described the circumstance, everyone got it right. So what
wow.
happens, I think, is you trust something, and then reality comes and goes, no, it's this. And you're like, well, I thought I was right. Well, actually, you are right. You got to learn to trust the fact that you may not have all the information, right? If these two people hadn't said that, everyone else would have thought they were wrong. They weren't wrong. What they picked up on, what was in the surrounding area of these two people. So your intuition is spot on. Whether you trust it or not is a whole nother ballgame, because if you're looking for validation, you might not get it. You might not get it.
That's the big one, when we said about trust, that is the big one. And I know even with, like my sensory media, the next generation,
Yeah.
and all the things that we're doing under a human approach. I mean, I know that we're having impact. I know that I'm getting feedback. I know that I'm growing. I know that we're building this community and everything, but I don't have that hard evidence yet that says, there's momentum, right? And so that, I know Napoleon Hill wrote that in Think and Grow Rich. The hardest work that you will ever do is work on something without the evidence to show that you're on the right track, and that's where intuition comes in to say, no, this is what I meant to do. And that's we talked about authenticity last week, and that's authenticity. I mean, that's very difficult to do, is to stay authentic and stay grounded, and to stay feeling in a good vibe and very calm about everything you're doing, despite bombs going off, or all the negativity or all the conditioning in even your own, right? And with that question that you asked, saying, what is your belief? And you asked me, I don't know if you want to go through any of the other questions, but you asked me a series of questions around that, about beliefs. And one of them, that one actually I took down to the water, and it was about the beliefs that were counter. And or what belief do you have that is kind of contributing to this? And I first I wasn't getting it. I wrote it down. I went down to the water. I sat there, and then all of a sudden it was like one after the other, after the other, after the other. All these things were coming in, and the majority of the beliefs that were on my quick list, I was going, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
Yeah.
So I was making up all these stories, right?
Yes. Yeah, I can go through them. So what I had said in the email is, well, the first thing is, do I believe I'm creating my reality? If you think you're a victim, then you're going to have a whole different perspective. You're going to think things are happening to you. And I know it feels like that some days, guys. I totally get it. I'm human too. However, you have to begin to shift that mindset and understand that you are a soul. You don't have one, you are one. So that perspective is, am I creating my reality? The second one is, does this situation feel like it's happening to me? Again, you need to begin to acknowledge, yes, I'm in this day, and today it feels like it's happening to me. Okay, great. Just acknowledge where you are. Don't pretend you're not somewhere you're not, and put on a happy face for the sake of whatever, pretending. Do I
happening
trust?
to me or for me or with me? It's, you mentioned words before. It's the language that you use, right?
Find the language that you resonate with, that is comfortable for you. But, I totally get the sort of like knee jerk, like, oh, that didn't feel very good. Do I trust that intuition is a logical, dependable, rational tool for decision making? Well, the reason I chose those words is because logical is a heavy word in our vocabulary. It means something scientific, right? Well, guess what? You are a soul having a physical perspective experience. So it is dependable. It is rational when you understand that. And it is logical to integrate intuition in the decision-making process when you come from that perspective. If you are an atheist, you're like, when it's done, it's done. None of this is going to make any sense to you. You just be like, all right, well, I don't, okay. And which isn't a wrong perspective. It's just a perspective. But, because I'm a spiritual teacher, this stuff is important to me, at least. Let's see, what else I say. Oh, do I trust that my heart or gut is leading me in the direction of what I want? Can I allow myself to follow the guidance right now? Am I willing to trust my inner guidance, even if the choices before me in this moment don't appear as I imagined they would, and I can't see the end clearly? Like, start asking yourself a series of questions to expose to yourself that you're sitting in a limiting belief, and then be like, all right, well, it's a limiting belief. Those are false statements to self. That's the truth. They're not the end all be all. It's not the way it's going to turn out. Because the way I always got myself out of it is I always thought, all right, well, here's the situation. It looks like it's never going to change. It looks like it's infinitely terrible. But guess what? On the other hand, there are infinite possibilities. Infinite. So that cannot be a final truth, the way I'm perceiving it as a victim of circumstance. It can't be. And so every single time, it's like, it's like the opening the floodgates for a creator. It's like writer's block for the creator. You gotta shift it around. You gotta go around the roadblock. You gotta find a way to manipulate the words in your head so that you can get back into flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely getting out of your own way, for sure. And it comes back to trust. You asked the question, do I trust my instinct? And I think newbies to using their intuition would say no. No, I don't trust it. I don't. And it's because they haven't been taught to, or they haven't put themselves to the test. I remember when I first started working with spiritual law and, the law of attraction being, the big popular one, right? And understanding the law of vibration. And I started putting a lot of stuff to the test, saying, okay, if I'm supposed to be a co-creator, what can I manifest? And then when you start to understand how vibration works, you go, I manifest everything. So you realize how much influence you have on, on your outcome. And so, like right now, I look at my circumstance and sometimes I question it and I go, okay, what did I do to create this? That it's not the circumstance that I want, but then I have to remind myself that maybe I'm just not there yet. That if I am in integrity and I am allowing myself to be guided, then I'm on the path. It doesn't mean that I have arrived, right? That I am on the path. And I think that's where the trusting the intuition comes in. That's so important. It's that, as we said right at the beginning, Allison, about looking for the evidence and trying to, be analytical, that, that the intuitive factor being one of our sensory factors is absolutely, is as concrete, reliable as the rest of them, if not more. We just have to understand how it fits in and where to use it. But that trust factor, that's a newbie, because I know, many times over the years is that, I remember being in a situation with a customer about 2.5, 3 years ago. And I worked for 8 months with them, building on a program. We were working towards a contract and triggering a pre-Christmas event thing that was going to launch. And it was like the program of my dreams. And I loved the people I was working with. We were like the three amigos. They were both out of California. I'd been to California a couple of times. I had invested so much energy with them, and I was looking so forward to the contract. When it came to the contract, the president of the company called in one of the partners and wanted to renegotiate the contract. And it was like, what? And he said, well, we're not going to do it unless you do ABC, which meant handing over all of my material. And I handed over the material, and 3 days later, they came back with a cease and desist order and cut me completely out of the project. So I'd worked for 8 months for free, and I handed them the keys to the kingdom. And I remember afterwards, it was right before Christmas. And of course, I had already bought Christmas presents, spent my money, and it was like, now what? And and I went to my team and I said, you need to manage people, customers over the next couple months, because I don't trust myself. And I had to kind of step back and go, and really look at that and go, wow, I jumped in with 2 feet, but I jumped in with the devil, right. But it was like, how did I not see that coming? Like, how was I so trusting? How did I do that? And it's like, I can't change who I am. And I will always be trusting, and I will always throw myself into it, because that's what I believe that's the realm that I've always worked on. The thing is, when you're working with people who are of that same dynamic and that same energy and that same vibration, it's like, man, you go to new heights. But if somebody is working on a competitive plane, or I need to get mine plane, then it is a give and take not equal. One gives, one takes, right?
Yeah.
So so it was a big learning experience again, but
That's what I call the
yeah,
negative synchronicity for positive outcomes. So I don't
right.
know if you have to put your glasses on to see this. Michelle said, that's challenging because reality, right, in air quotes, or practical circumstances may not afford a person to stick with the intuitive process. So what I would say to that, Michelle, is I'd answer with a question. The question is, what would I need to believe is true about myself in this situation to feel the way I do? So ask yourself that question. What would I need to believe is true about myself in regards to this situation to feel the way I do? The reason that question is so important is because when you ask yourself how you feel is an indication of the vibration you're in and this non-physical realm of perspective through the physical lens. And the vibration is what's creating the reality, right? That's what we know through, even the scientists that have done, quantum physicists and other people about the nature of reality. But so the answer is you think it's challenging, right? Your perspective is it's challenging. And this is perspective of pretty much every human. But we think it's challenging because practical circumstances. So you're giving the power of a circumstance to decide whether you invest in your intuitive process or not. Is that so the question is that how you want to keep operating? Because the intuitive process is 100%. It's not like you have to actually increase your intuitive power. What you have to do is reveal to yourself the 100% that's already there. Most people think they have to work on they have to work on my intuition. I have to learn how to be more intuitive. The intuitive information is coming through 100%. We block it off with a belief that says, I can't trust it because a practical circumstance is sitting in my way. That's actually not true. You can trust it despite anything that's happening to you. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you framed that really well, and I'm feeling that situation. Like I understand exactly what she's saying. Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling that situation, and I think it is that exactly that thing when you go the practical circumstances, and I think that's how many times do people say, well, that's not reality. Or like I know when I go on a golf trip and then everybody says, I guess next week we go back to reality, and I go, no, this was reality. This golf trip is as real as the work that we're going to do next week, right? So I think it is the perspective, and that's that is the aha. That's the mind shift of saying, it is what it is, right? It's how I'm going to view it and what filter I'm using to view that. So if practicality says, well, I'm on this mission and I feel really good about what I'm doing and I'm going to allow myself to be guided, but geez, I'm not making any money. Like this must be the wrong path. Well, again, your intuition is talking to you. What is it saying? Is it saying shift? Is it saying open your mind? Is it saying no, keep going? It's being able to be in tune to that and allow yourself to continue the flow and create whatever that outcome is that you want. And I'm not going to be the first person to say that's easy, because it's not. It's not, because your beliefs are always in the way. They are your filters. Yeah.
Yep. What's interesting is Michelle's a writer. And so Michelle, from a standpoint of being a writer, you chose specific words, right? You wrote a sentence, and in that sentence, you chose particular words. You chose challenging because it represents how you feel about it. Practical circumstance. Now, oftentimes people use the words practical circumstance as a way of offering this as a way of legitimizing why they can't move forward. May not afford, there's a lot wrapped up. This is, if you just read your sentence back, it's telling you what you believe to be true about the intuitive process. I can't stick with it because of all this other stuff. And I'm saying there's infinite choices. That's what I'm saying. And I felt like you did for so long until I, little by little by little, kept saying, well, you know what, there's actually infinite choices. How do I discover those infinite choices? What's the difference between inspired action and shooting on myself? Like, I should just do this, stuff that feels like I have to do it versus doing the stuff. And then we flip flop. We do one, we do the other. We see what turns out. going back to what you said, Jay, just a little bit a while ago, but everything is a step along the way. There is no real end point. Everything is a step along the way. So, everything that we do is an opportunity to go against our, what we call better judgment, which is, what our intuition told us, or to go with it and to see what happens and how do we feel when we do one versus the other. And there is no wrong decision.
No, sometimes it just takes more courage, it just like the fear excitement, right? It's, anything that you're doing is going to be scary and exciting. And of course, when you're rewiring your brain and adjusting your paradigms and going, I don't think that filter is serving me anymore, because now I've been conditioned to think in terms of practicality, that, okay, what is practical? What kind of reality am I shaping with that? Right. So I think I love what you did with the words. I think that's really true. And I think of, when I've been, and I've sat on so many boards and councils and committees and stuff, and I learned, so many times I throw ideas out there, and I tell people, if they're new to me, I say, what, I'm one of those brainstorming people. I'm just going to throw out whatever comes to mind. I'm not saying it's a good idea or you should even entertain it. I'm just going to throw it out there. And, if anybody wants to pick up and talk about it, then great, and, but, there are people who won't say anything. And then there's people that'll go, well, that won't work. Right. And so I learned, and that's okay, and I learned to not say, why do you think it won't work? I learned to say, well, if it did work, what would that look like? And get people shifting their viewpoint, and to say, if it did work, just by some magic, spell or whatever, if it did work, let's just play for a second and see what would happen. And that's where the creativity comes out, not in trying to come up with that really good idea, but just going, what, if I were to write a book, if I were, I'm not a writer, I can't do this, or well, I don't have anything to say, all the things I told myself before I wrote my first book, all the things that happened. But if I were to write a book, what might that look like, and then you start to brainstorm in your mind about, you allow that intuitive channeling. It's like, well, I like to talk about this, or I like to work with kids, or, I went through an abusive story that I love to tell people, like you start to, all of a sudden the creativity comes through, and you are creating a little different reality for yourself, right?
I love that. I love that different questioning. It made me think of, actually, I just put Michelle's back up there again, because it made me think of when someone is a writer, to me, writing is an intuitive process. Like, I mean, you're a writer too, Jay, it's just like coming up with it. Once you condition yourself to writing, it's an intuitive process. You don't ever go, writers create fictional characters. That's intuition. That's daydreaming. That's imagination, right? That's having a relationship with something that doesn't exist. But then you shift topics, and all of a sudden people go, I can't use that anymore. Like, yeah, you can. Of course you can. You can use intuition. At the beginning, this woman's in business, for God's sakes. She banked her intuition. If that's your jam, do it. It's like, it is 100% there. Yeah. Change your questions like you just did. Like, just tweak the question, allow it to come through, and then roll with it. It's like, it's such a valuable untapped resource.
And I think it circles back to what we were talking about of authenticity last week about, when you have, I call it a craving, like when you feel called to do something, and then you start shitting on yourself, about all of your, and I do the same thing. I sit there and I go, oh, my to-do list, A, B, C, D, E. And then it goes down to X, Y, Z. It's like, oh my God, this thing is never ending. And I go back and kind of look at the list and go, okay, what can I delegate? What absolutely needs to be done now? What doesn't? And I proportionate time, and I proportionate fun time, about fun time, about getting out, about when I did that session yesterday or the day before about, connecting your values with your work. And, and we did a series of questions to kind of identify the values. Now, a few years ago, or I've always said, like, my top value is family. And I realized through this exercise that it is not now. It is not now. And but I think the authenticity and the brain cramps come to trying to figure out how to do something when intuitively you should be doing something else. In other words, people were saying, I really love my work, but I feel guilty that I'm not with my family. Well, if your value is to build your work and serve the way that you believe that you're being called to do, that doesn't mean you love your family less. It just means that you want to follow that guidance, and that's really important to your spirit, right? So you still give your family whatever, but it's a different choice, and it's out guilt, right? It's without guilt, and we don't allow ourselves that. Or that's my my witness is that a lot of people don't allow themselves to go, what would I want to do if money was no object? We don't allow ourselves to do that because we've been so conditioned to be cogs in the system and have to play that game, of paying the mortgage and putting the kids through school and all that stuff, that we forget that our spirit is crying, to do some fun stuff, right? And so even if we allow ourselves 10 or 20% of the day, to follow that, and quit trying to figure out what it's going to look like, just go with it and be, and as you said, first question about, throwing yourself into it with so much excitement without any attachment to the outcome. If you want to write, just write. Like if you feel, and I know with the writing that people go, oh, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I wrote. Like that never worked for me. I wrote when it came to me. And when it came to me, I just went as far as I could go with it. And then it was like, oh, okay, I got to park it. I got to go, step away. So, I think it's learning to kind of follow that, right?
Michelle says, we writers are consistent overthinkers. There's a belief. Right? There's a belief right there. Thank you for writing that. And our anxiety is our backpack. That's your backpack. And I think that because it's not my backpack anymore and I'm a writer. And so, yes, well, that's the thing is we project and we use these generalizations. But Michelle, I think the beautiful thing is this just shows you how you perceive the process. Right? Yeah. Which is such a beautiful thing. What do I need to believe true about myself in the situation to feel the way I do? Right? Like, there's a big story about writers being strugglers and having addictions and, the way that you have to be addicted or struggling to be a good writer. That's a whole storyline to begin with, like that's been going on for a long time. Yeah. But it's only a storyline for us as individuals if we accept it as our storyline. My storyline became intuition guides me in my writing whenever I needed to.
That's right.
So,
and that's where, writing Aha Moment Mondays, which I've done for 6.5 years now. I didn't realize until the spring when I went back on the archives and go, oh my God, I've been doing this for 6 years, and didn't realize that I've written like every week an Aha Moment Monday, and every one of them is about what we're talking about with Michelle and everyone is about look at the words and phrases you're using and look at how you're framing things. And every week we have a topic that shifts that perspective in a way of saying, okay, here's what we're all experiencing. And I do talk about that backpack and how heavy it can be and what it feels like to put it down and what's in it, unpack it, what's in it, right?
Yeah.
So, I think after writing those, and the same thing, some weeks, and I said to people, first of all, I am always talking to myself first on the ahas, because it's always something that I've experienced or something I've shared or something I've, just gone through, right? Or that I feel like, yes, last week I wrote about fear because fear keeps coming up, right? And so, but sometimes those ahas just absolutely pour out. Now, as a writer, I mean, like we were talking about, I'm very careful of the words I'm choosing, making sure the sentences make sense and that there's a proper outcome. So, I mean, they don't come easily, I won't say that, but sometimes the topics and the aha, the actual shift just kind of streams out. Other times it's a lot of work. And so, people say, well, why don't you just write 4 or 5 so that you've got them in the archives? It's like, that's not how the creativity process works. It's not like I just go, okay, this morning I'm going to write a whole bunch of stuff. Like that's not what the ahas are. I could sit there and do a bunch of research and probably could, but I do write them, no more than a couple a week, unless some things really pour out. And for that reason, reason to kind of make sure that they're current and everything. But they've been probably one of the single best things that I've done, not just for me as a learning tool, but it's been like one of the most amazing connection tools that most people, like they'll know me in the industry, or they'll know, some of the work I've done, but it's the aha moments that keeps us connected. They just go, wow, I just love what you say. I just love how you think. So something like that resonates. So
Yeah.
And I did talk a lot about, I mean, you see, I'm a writer. I always call myself a communicator because I didn't study journalism or anything. I
Yes.
love language. I love looking at derivatives of words and stuff. But in it is just about who are you talking to and what has meaning and how do you communicate that in a way
Yeah.
that, has positive impact with somebody, right?
Right. Michelle said, yeah, I'm talking about through my lens. Yeah. And so I don't mean it to sound shocking if I say only through your lens, but it's like, because I think we try to generalize and we find solace in communing together in our painful points. However, what my mission is to help people understand their own independent journey. So words are so powerful. And I love how the aha moments is, like I agree with you. I'm more of a keep it in the moment, and right in the moment type of person as well. All right. So we're at 54 minutes. We can go a long time.
I know. And
so
we
maybe
could easily do another 54.
I know. So upon sort of wrapping it up, why don't I just tell people how they can reach out to you and when the ways in which you are serving them at the moment, and I'll do the same and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. To get the aha moments, and that I think the best way is to get on our list, because we're communicating with people on a regular basis of what we're doing. And so it's my website is under my name, jrang.com, and you can just go and pop on our mailing list and get the aha moments. All the aha moments in the last 6.5 years are written, are all archived. So I mean, you can look at any of them, and some, one or two intuitively is going to jump out. My the aha moment journal that I wrote was a compilation of 60. Now I published this about 2 years ago. So the aha moment journal it's on Amazon. It's also available on our website, and the pages are purposely not numbered in the book. And so there is no order to read it. You open the book and you open up, and what will happen is you'll get an aha on one side, and then there'll be a blank page. I don't know do this very well on the other side. So the whole point of the aha is if you read it, you might go, oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that makes sense. But if you actually journal what you're thinking about and why it makes a difference, that's the work that you're doing. Like you were saying with Michelle about, that's your thing with the backpack. That's not generalized. That's your thing. So look at that. So when you go through, this is your like private little journal. So I love the journal. So aha moments in the journal on the website. We're also creating a membership because we're really looking for, the people that we're talking to are probably people very similar to you and I, Allison, probably younger than I am, but who are business leaders, women primarily, who have had success. They either have their own companies or they're running a big company or something, but they just know that they've given away a lot and that they're not making the impact, or they don't feel like they're in as integrity as they want. So we're creating a membership and a community around that. $35 a month, and the top right hand side that you just jump on and go, I want to be a member. $35 a month. We have so much value. We talk to people on a regular basis. We have live Q&As, and we have a number of programs and tools in there. Often there's lots of discounts and stuff. Whether somebody just needs some nutritional help, or they need they want to do a podcast, or they want to learn a little bit more about body language, we have a whole gamut of tools for people to kind of, to help themselves move forward. So it's all on jrang.com.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been there, I've looked at it. Actually, as you're showing your book, my book is holding up. My book is holding up my computer as I move it. So yeah, for me, this is my book. It's the curriculum that I work with people on. Accelerate Your Mojo: 7 Simple Steps to Ignite Intuition, Shake Off Fear, and Unleash Your Real You. So you can get the book. You can read the book. It's an online course. You can enroll in a self-guided online course. You can do that. But right now I'm working with people. So if someone has an inclination, an excitement, how do you know if working with me is right? You're excited about it. You're interested in it. It feels like something that would help you in some way with those 3 points: intuition, transforming fear, and living authentically. And I consider my expert because I went through them. I was doing the exact opposite of all of those, and I found a way into them, and to recognize and realize the benefits of those 3 components working together synchronistically to produce more self-confidence, more self-love, more inspired action, more authenticity. And because I would never have been 7 years ago, I would never have done this, and I wouldn't have done it like myself. I would have pretended to be somebody else, and all of that. So I'm inviting people to work with me one-on-one. It's a fantastic program.
Yeah, and I think that, what I love about your approach too is that that you do have a methodology, but a
Yeah.
lot of it comes with asking questions, and because everybody's journey is going to be different. Some may have more issues with fear, overcoming fear versus being authentic, and everybody's kind of going to have a uniqueness. So I think it's the questions that you ask through that process to help people, do the process their way is so empowering. Yeah.
Yeah, because in fact, I don't even know why I had this here. This is like it's this thing that I originally, when I was, it's not going to make sense, but it's like the structure of when I was creating the program. I needed to take what I knew from standardized education and de-standardize the personal development stuff, but with a structure. Because without somewhere to go, and it's like I talk about things like, because when I was moving through like what we don't do in school, is we ingest information, but we don't digest and assimilate information. Usually it's just memorize and spit back. It's like, just forget it.
Right.
But like my program is about ingesting what is right for you, digesting it, assimilating it, because in the colon, that's where nutrients are assimilated, right? It's where things get into our body. And then excretion is where you get rid of the shit you don't need. Like anything in my program you don't need, you just get rid of. It's completely structured, but also so individualized. It's the craziest thing. It all came through intuition, following my intuitive guidance, asking questions and taking two structures, putting them together, because personal development is personal. It's personal. That's the whole thing, is like you can't structure it's personal. It depends on the person. So I overlaid those two, and it was just so fun doing it. But I have spots open for people. I'm very much a boutique, only a couple people at a time. So people can get a hold of me and do that. So that's our talk for today. So I would say, you know what, if your brain is having cramps, go over this again and see what you can pick out.
Perfect.
And now
I got to go figure out why my audio doesn't work on my computer. Actually, this afternoon I'm really excited because I'm going up to a speaking of writing. I'm going to an event called Literacy and Lilacs. I actually started at 10 o'clock this morning, and it's put on by Hasmark Publishing, who is my publisher, and they're doing a little thing for authors and to get people into literacy. And some authors like myself will have books there for signing and whatever. And they, just kind of having an afternoon of awareness and connecting, authors, connecting people with literacy. So, it's the first ever for them to do something like that. So I'm going to pop over there this afternoon and participate in some of the festivities there in celebration of learning.
Cool. And then we'll see everyone next week for the 3rd edition. We'll let them know via email, via social media. Follow us both on social media if you're interested. If you're not, don't. and we'll see you next time. All right, guys. See you later. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Bye. Thanks.